Alright guys, TouchCrow here back again today. Hope you're enjoying your Sunday so far, and today we're going to talk about the topic of does age matter in Call of Duty Esports. Over the last several days, I've really heard a reverberation around the community as to whether age has a significant impact on how well players happen to play. We tend to see players retiring at like 25, 26 years of age in esports. Doesn't necessarily happen in normal sports. Is this because these players are falling off mechanically, or is there another reason behind it, which I think is more likely, rather than just necessarily that they can't compete anymore with the cracked out young guns with the great reaction times? We're going to look at a couple of sides to this in the coming minutes. Very intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Like if you guys enjoy the video, subscribe if you are new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it as well. Really helps out the channel. Thank you for doing that. And before we get into things, this then came out from Alex, once again hinting at the fact that Shawnee, London, well, Shawnee on London of course, and the Dylan CoD and Alex's of the world are going to be teaming with him on the London Royal Ravens next season. So, well, if they're baiting about this, fair play indeed. This is really where it started a couple of days ago then. So Crimsix tweets this out. Of course, there was this podcast that went on, and well, they discussed how they don't think Looney would be a great fit on the Seattle Surge. Of course, now confirmed a couple of days ago. And well, partly because, you know, he's 27 now, he's getting older a bit, and he's going to have a difficult time competing with the younger, cracked out SMGs in the game. Gunless doesn't agree by any means and says the guy said age plays a part. His opinion got thrown out the window once he said that. And well, we get a similar discussion here from Silly. The fact that people keep pushing the age narrative after Clayster, the oldest player in the league at 28, as we'll look in a second, won the World Championship 2 years in a row, is mind-blowing to me. And then Looney comes back with the player that was really the center of this, but he runs an AR. If you run an SMG, you need to be young and cracked. So is there any truth to this? Of course, age plays some degree of a factor. Let's just start the video with that. Like, we're not going to be seeing 80-year-olds in the CDL anytime soon, but I suppose the question is, when is the cutoff when people actually start significantly degrading in terms of their mechanical ability, I suppose, to compete with some of the guys who are in their physical prime, I suppose, or at least their Call of Duty playing prime, which is probably slightly different to their physical prime, as we'll look at in a second, from a lifestyle perspective. But the guys on the podcast came back and said scientific studies that indicate age matters. This beats out anecdotal evidence any day. So this is the article they looked at right here. This is the abstract. I'll leave this link down below for you guys to check it if you want. This is the interesting sentence. Using a piecewise regression analysis, whatever that is, we find that age-related slowing of within-game self-initiated response times begins at 24 years of age. And this was kind of the graphic that came out as a result of that. But I think simplifying Call of Duty down to just a reaction time based game is taking things one step too far. Let's do a comparison to tennis, for example. You could say it's the same thing. You could simplify tennis down to just reaction time and say it's simply a product of how quickly you can react to where your opponent is hitting the ball, and so, well, going left or right and hitting the ball as a result of that. And well, you would imagine if that was the case, the players that would be dominating the tennis scene would be like the 20-year-olds, like 19, 20, all these kind of guys. However, that is not the case, right, as we will look at in just a second here with Novak Djokovic and Roger Federer winning titles and winning Grand Slams into their mid to late 30s. So that clearly cannot just be the case, because if reaction time fell off as it is indicated in this study, then obviously there are more factors at play, and there are more factors at play in Call of Duty as well. In tennis, for example, endurance is a big thing, the mental game is a big thing, intuition is a big thing as well. It's not necessarily a matter of just reacting to where your opponent hits the ball, but looking at their body language and how they're going to approach the shot to then determine where they're going to hit the ball. And it's a very similar thing, and you can draw great parallels over to Call of Duty in the sense that the mental game is very important. Team play, of course, teamwork isn't really such a thing in tennis, but is very important in Call of Duty, and maybe even gets better with age and with experience. But also intuition, predicting where the enemies are going to be, picking up on little cues in terms of where the mini-map's looking like and where your teammates are positioned and what gunfight they particularly won to determine whether the spawns are going to be, if you're not playing Modern Warfare, of course, and you can actually predict where the spawns are going to be. But as you can see right here, of course, Djokovic, Nadal and Federer winning Grand Slams into their mid to late 30s, and well, Federer won his 20th Grand Slam at like almost 37 years of age. So if, well, tennis was just a reaction time game, that would surely not be possible, in the same way that Call of Duty is not just a reaction time game. There are certainly other factors at play. But as Chance says, skills certainly do degrade to some degree in esports. There's no doubt that, as I said, like a 70 or 80-year-old isn't going to be able to compete. And as Chance says, obviously eventually age comes into play, but when does the decline start? Your 40s, your 50s, any earlier than that, I have strong doubts. I mean, arguing in a similar way to what we looked at. I mean, we'll look at LeBron in a second, of course, LeBron James in basketball. He's like 35, still dominating the scene, right? So why do we not tend to see the same thing happen in esports that we see in traditional sports, where some of these guys can actually compete onto a very old age? I mean, you've got the likes of Forrest in Counter-Strike Global Offensive. He's like 32 now, been competing at the top level of Counter-Strike for a very long time. So why do we not tend to see this in Call of Duty? And as Nick says over at FaZe, the two oldest players in the CoD League, Crim and Clay, literally just won the World Championship, and a month later crater, the main topic debate throughout the entire community is if or why pros fall off when they age. Now, you could certainly make the argument that if you're an SMG, because if you look at Crim and Clayster here, they tended to run the assault rifles on the Dallas Empire team. If you're an SMG player, you're being required to be in these like really fast-paced, heavy engagements up close and personal with your enemies, and it tends to be the Hook, Illy, Shotzi, Sypien and Beezies of the world who run those really fast-paced roles, because I suppose those are roles where reaction time does have an impact, right? There's a lot of gunfights in Call of Duty which aren't necessarily about, well, you're just purely reaction time, you're aiming down sights, waiting for someone to come around a corner with an assault rifle. Reaction time doesn't matter too much if you can predict them to be there. But if you're an SMG and you're flying in first, reaction time does have an impact, because you may be in very many 50-50 gunfights where you're not ready for the engagement. And maybe you could argue that as players get older than 24 and maybe their reaction time starts to decrease, as in that study, being an SMG is somewhat harder than being an assault rifle, right? Then again, if you're a guy like Apathy maybe and still relatively well competing at a relatively old age in Call of Duty Esports, let's say he had an above average reaction time already, and even though his reaction time is declining, it might take him to get to like 30 years old before his reaction time is actually still at the average level of a Call of Duty player, right? Like if you have a freakishly good reaction time, you could certainly still compete for a much longer time. But as Parasite then says, I was playing against cracked youngins and newly 18-year-olds all year in challenges and playing from the West Coast, swapping from team to team roles and leading. People just do not understand. And well, here we go at Clayster, for example, 28 years old, just won the back-to-back World Championship. He went 1,400 days or something without winning a championship from, Advanced Warfare Season 3 playoffs, all the way through Black Ops 3, all the way through Infinite Warfare, all the way through World War 2, before he won the Stage 2 playoffs in Black Ops 4 at, pretty much 27 years of age, and now at 28 he is a back-to-back world champion. Almost a renaissance in the sense of, if you guys know Ronnie O'Sullivan in snooker, and this has been seen to some degree in other sports as well, the likes of, Roger Federer, of course, having a few years where people said, he's too old, he's washed or whatever, comes back and wins a few more, Grand Slams, which is unbelievable. Of course, the initial topic was around Looney, right, who's 27 at this point, and is there a difference, right, between being an assault rifle and being an SMG? We see many of the older players in the league tend to be assault rifle players, and putting them on an SMG isn't necessarily great, but there's a couple of key reasons, I think, for that, which we'll go into right now. The first one of which is potentially that a lot of the older players came up playing Call of Duty games way back in the day. They came up playing games like CoD 4, where you had to play very, traditional Call of Duty, I suppose, in the sense that it wasn't about, sprinting around the corner and absolutely flying at someone. It was more about playing positionally and playing, analytically and, well, deciding on which move you're going to make, I suppose, in a game, almost like a chess game in a sense, rather than how we've seen in 5v5 play in Black Ops 4 Modern Warfare, where it's literally flying your bodies at something. And I suppose that, making the adaptation, I suppose, from being an SMG in those older games to the newer games is somewhat difficult, whereas a lot of the youngins, I suppose, as Parasite described them as, have come up playing games like Black Ops 3 Infinite Warfare, where it is about just flying at people and, having fast reactions and snapping in that sense. So it does seem somewhat difficult for the older type players that have been around a number of years to adapt to this kind of new style of play, and maybe it's just so ingrained in their habits from, playing Call of Duty for a number of years before a lot of the current cracked out players even, came into playing Call of Duty really and were too young to be playing games like CoD 4 and Black Ops 1 and all this kind of stuff. It certainly seems to come more naturally to some of the younger players that we have in the league. The other side of it, of course, which Illy touches on nicely here, the only way age has impact IMO is not caring or being focused as much as you used to be before. And I think this is undoubtedly the main one that we have to talk about here, because a lot of these younger guys are coming up, all they've played their entire life is Call of Duty, right? They don't have a long-time girlfriend, they don't have a family, they don't have pets, they don't have anything to deal with like that, they don't have bills to pay on necessarily the same degree as you do when you get a little bit older. When players start to mature and start to develop and start to get, fiancés and get married and all this kind of stuff, have kids like Apathy and Karma, for example, gets to the point where now you're a proper adult in the sense that you have to deal with all the responsibility you have. You've also got to think about what happens after Call of Duty. Am I going to try and build my stream? Am I going to try and build my personal brand to become a content creator? But I've also got to look after my family and, a lot more responsibility, I suppose, comes with age, to the point where you can't necessarily just play 12 hours of Call of Duty a day without a care in the world. There's a lot else going on in your life, I suppose, and you can argue there's a lot more to be maintained in terms of your stability as a job and what your potential future career might be, to the point where you're not necessarily grinding out the game 12 hours a day to be the best player you can possibly be, but just doing what you can to get by in that sense. And I think this is absolutely undoubtedly the number one thing that tends to happen in esports that not necessarily happens in other sports, because in other sports you can't necessarily play 12 hours of football or whatever every single day, but in esports and in Call of Duty you can, right? And a lot of people have done that for the first several years of their career, to the point where they get somewhat burnt out by the time they're mid-20s and they've got all these other responsibilities now coming into play, and they've still got to compete with the best players in esports that are still still playing 12 hours a day and putting all this time in. That's not something that a lot of the other older players can do. And as I just said, burnout is a thing, right? These guys playing so much Call of Duty for so many years of their life gets to the point where can they put in that time? Do they have the drive that they used to, especially after they've won championships? And I think in Karma's example, especially, like, he just doesn't want to get on to scrim anymore. He doesn't have the passion anymore for the game that he used to back in the day. As well, maybe players can redevelop that. Clayster certainly clearly still has it, and he's going on 28, 29, but it doesn't necessarily happen all across the board. But maybe in traditional sports, it's more likely, as Drew says, talking about LeBron here at 35 years of age. I think this is a good thread as well. So Jake Lucky says age does matter in esports, and well, this reply, I think this is correct, but not necessarily due to reaction time or general skill, but rather the timeline of their lives. As you get older, most people get married, have kids, have their priorities, of course, changing, and well, they're likely to be grinding to the point of getting to burnout. And well, this funny tweet just to finish here from Meredith. I'm not sure why people are using Clayster as an example of age not playing a factor. Guy is so bad and looks like Shaggy wrong accounts, as he says. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you for getting this far. If you did enjoy it, I'd greatly appreciate a like on the video. It really helps the YouTube algorithm know you like this content. Other people may enjoy it too, and push the Call of Duty community out to new audiences. Intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comment section below though. Do you think age has a significant impact on how good professional players are? And well, what are the key reasons behind that? Thank you for watching as always, and I will see you next time.